Hey, everybody, and welcome to Keeping It Spiritually Simple. I'm Sandra McGellis, and today I have a very, very, very special guest, Tom Kenyon. He is a psychotherapist, a shaman, an author, a teacher, a musician, a channeler. I could go on and on and on. But before he gets to speak, I really want to ask each and every one of you to put your headphones on if you can, to listen in, because this is really important. And at the end, you're going to have a real nice treat to be able to go to his website and to listen to a lot of the content at no charge. You can sign up for his email. So all that information will be in the description. But right now, just curl up those little fingers and deny yourself the, I need to get on my computer and find out more about Tom, because I would like for you to use your listening senses and then your heart portal to take in. So welcome, Tom. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing pretty well. We're about to get a lot of rain here, but hey, you can't control the weather, right?
No, although some people say the weather is being controlled, but certainly as individuals, we can't control the weather.
Absolutely. So, let's just tell everybody from scratch, because I know everything's on your website and people are going to want to go there afterwards and sign up for your newsletter and listen to all the magical things that go on there. Can we tell everybody kind of like, where was Tom before some of these other things occurred? Did you naturally come in with remembrance of past lives? Did you naturally come in with, were you drawn to music or different types of notes and toning? I know you're a psychotherapist, so that involves a lot. And then how did these other things come into play for you?
Well, I think looking back, when I was a child, like a young child, my father made me a swing from a very large oak tree. And I would go out at twilight, which was one of my favorite times, and I would swing and sing to the stars and the moon. And as a child, I felt like they were hearing me and I could hear them responding to me at a feeling level. And I would just get lost in that world of sound and mental emotional impressions. And my mother would have to go out and drag me back into the house to eat. So that early response to sound and music was very important to me. And then when I was 18, I think that was the pivotal point for me and my quote unquote search for what was happening. I was crossing my uncle's farm where he had some cattle, and it was late afternoon in the fall. And I was walking across the field, and there was a large tree, and I sat down underneath the tree for a moment, and my hands went into spontaneous mudras, and I didn't even know what a mudra was. And I went into a half lotus, and I didn't even know what a half lotus was. I was a white boy from North Carolina. I had no context. And suddenly the world, the physical sensory world disappeared, completely gone. And I entered a deep state of what is now called samadhi, I realized. Then I didn't know that word. Samadhi is just a reorientation to the inner world rather than the outer world. When I entered into that inner world, I was aware of being aware, which is sometimes called the I am presence or the witness. But there was no thought. It was just pure awareness. And then I came to, and I thought maybe a few minutes had passed, but several hours had passed because the sun was setting. And
Mm.
interestingly, there were 3 or 4 cows that had wandered up to me and were just looking at me, chewing their cud. And that drove me into an exploration of what this was. And it took me into Christian mysticism because that was was raised in a Christian family and Western culture. And then it expanded into Eastern methods, Taoism and yogas and Siddhas yoga and shamanism. And and it grew. The next pivotal point, as I was trying to wrestle with all these different theories of what was going on, what allowed me to constellate everything in a way that I could manage was through the lens of science, which is interesting because we normally think of science and spiritual things as, opposites. But actually, there's a place where they overlap, and that's a very interesting territory. And so I began to look at how the brain operates and how it affects things. And it explained a lot to me because if you look at the meditative traditions all over the world, there's been studies done, and it shows that no matter what tradition you might use, what meditation technique you might use, the dogmas might be different. It's the same area the brain is responding. It's called the orientation area. And the orientation area normally adjust our perception so we can avoid bumping into things. It makes a map. The brain makes a map of the external reality. Very important thing for survival. But when you go into a meditative state, they shut down, they hibernate. And so what you're now receiving are sensory information from your inner world. And that's a very interesting state. And so then in 1983, when I was doing psychotherapy, I realized that sound could facilitate therapy. And I began to work with a group of researchers, and we called it acoustic brain research. And we studied how sound and music affect the brain through EEG studies. So that was really I guess, the plateau from which I jumped into an encounter with the Hathors, which I was not prepared for and did not invite and was actually annoyed by at first because it just blew my paradigm of reality out of the water. And that was very annoying because I had my little niche. You know, I was a rationalist. I had my little degree. I was doing my practice. Don't tell me anything that's going to upset the cart. Well, they upset the cart. Let's put it that way. And I'm glad they did. But it was interesting that in psychology, we call it spiritual emergence or emergency. When a paradigm shift suddenly occurs and a person is not prepared for it. And that's what happened for me with the Hathors, because their view of reality is so expanded, much more than I was at that time. So it was interesting when I first made contact with them. I was doing a Siddhas meditation retreat on my own. I was just we had a separate building, and I went there and was meditating, and they appeared psychically. I saw two of them, not physically. It was not a physical hallucination. It was what we call psychic vision, clairvoyance. And one of them spoke, and the other one just observed. And I think it was a student project. I think that in Hathor land, they said, we're going to send you to these primitive people called humans, and we want one of you to observe and report back to us, and one of you will ask questions. I think that's what it was from some funny perspective. I don't really think that, but it's a good story. The first thing they said, the one who spoke said, we are the Hathors. We come with love and the sounding of a new reality for your earth. And so they started taking me into experiences and meditations based on sacred geometry that I had to acknowledge were powerful and effective. In fact, I started working with other people to share this, and it was affecting people in very positive ways. But I could not accept who they said they were and where they came from. So it was a growing process of many years for me to be comfortable and allow the expansion to take place that would allow me to accommodate these beings. So now I have enough personal history with them that I'm confident and trust what I get.
So Tom, when the Hathors came and they were originally sort of in your quiet space, your other sensories where you could see them, were they talking to you just like they talked to you and I? Were they talking to you through thought and through feelings, and it translated into words and things that you could explain?
Yeah, sometimes they do transfer thoughts and feelings, which then I put language on. In that particular first encounter, I heard them distinctly. They were distinct words. They were because they wanted me to get what they were talking about.
Wow. Because when I speak with spirit, they translate it almost into my own thought. So I can't tell it's another voice. I can tell sometimes the way they may say something that it's not something I would say in my walking human.
Right.
Or they may use words, but I also translate through feeling. But because of vocal cord issues, I'm not a singer or big on toning. I do try to work on that, but you've got all of it. And I think they came to you because you designed that maybe before you came here. So tell us a little bit, tell us more, please.
Which aspect?
Well, tell us a little bit more about your interactions with the Hathors and then how it developed from there to work on your music. Because is
Right.
that how you're translating a lot of their things, is
Mhm.
through being a musician and
Yes.
using your vocals and so on?
Yeah, they're masters of sound and love being coherent emotion. They're masters at that. Um, I think one of the funniest encounters I had with them occurred around my 35th birthday, and we had moved to Orcas Island. and I'd taken my one of my sons, to a martial arts class, and I went to go sit in the park. And it just so happened that that day was also my birthday. And I would, at that point, was getting very gnarly with the Hathors because they were expanding my view of reality so quickly. My governors were coming in, like we all have this, most of us, maybe not all of us, most of us have this space that we can allow ourselves to move into of happiness or even bliss, but we can't take, many of us can't, we have a limit on how much bliss and happiness we can take before we screw things up.
Okay.
And do it internally, or sometimes we create external events that kind of sidetrack us. So I was like in my position with them, like, I'm not going to participate in this because they told me we're going to take you through a major initiation. I said, well, you try. I'm not even going to meditate today. Now, after my experience when I was 18, I meditated every day without fail, just because I needed to connect and understand. But on that day to them, I said, I'm not going to participate. I'm not even going to meditate. You try, see what you can do. So I was just sitting in the park. My son was at martial arts. And all of a sudden they said, it's time. Now, it was very funny because my subjective experience, sensory experience, was different than my physical sensory experience. Somehow they separated. I was aware physically sitting on the ground. I looked like a normal person just sitting there. But subjectively, the ground opened up and a hole appeared right in front of me. And I fell into the hole. And my hands, my physical hands, were holding the grass, my body was trying to keep me from falling into the hole. But the hole was not in the physical dimension. It was in another dimension, which I was perceiving, but my physical senses, my body was in alert. Oh my God, we're going to fall into a hole. So I fell through a hole into the center of the earth. And as I passed through, I encountered various beings. And one of them was a fire twirler. And he said, when you come back, we want to ask you a question. I mean, what? Come back from where? Where are you taking me? Phew, went down further. And then there were these Aborigines, and they were doing, we want to ask you a question when you return. So suddenly I'm in the center of the earth. This is a subjective experience. Again, I was still aware of the physical reality I was sitting in. It was not an hallucination. It was an internal impression that was very, very powerful. I was in the bottom of this tunnel, and there was this egg-like amorphous luminous being. And he said, I am the earth dreamer, and I have dreamed the world into existence, and I'm about ready to change my dream. Will you sing the song of the new earth? And I was like, whoa. I actually said, let me think about it. Because I have found in working with spiritual beings or any type of being, always ask for the details, the specificity, the small print, what's actually involved. Don't jump into a new reality until we understand all the parameters of it. So as soon as I said that, I started coming up the tunnel, and I ran into the Aborigines again. They said, will you sing the song of the new earth? And I said, I'm thinking about it. And the fire twirlers at the top, and they said, I'm thinking about it. And when I came out, I had a very odd experience, and it speaks to the nature of energy fields, subtle energy fields. I was there by myself when I started, but when I came out of the tunnel and realized I was back in physical reality, I looked in front of me, and about, I don't know, 50 feet, not much more than that, was a young couple that had sat down and had not seen me. And they had come there to make out. And they start doing their thing, and the guy has taken off his shirt and he's unbuttoning her blouse, and I'm going, what do I do? What do I do? My panic was they're going to turn around and see me suddenly, and I'm going to say, I'm not a pervert. I was here first. Really, I'm not looking. I'm really not looking.
Oh my
So
goodness.
interestingly, it was the young woman that picked up that something was right. The man, he was lost in his libido and whatever. And she said, something's not right. Something's not right. We let's move over somewhere further down. So they got up and left, fortunately. So I've had that experience of invisibility before. It's not something I'm in control of. But in that moment, the energy field that had been created in me by interacting with the Hathors and these beings shifted somehow my field so such a way that I was not visible to those people. And it's happened before. And I know a lot of practitioners and meditators sometimes experience this.
Yeah, I can't say I'm a huge on meditating. I do walking meditation, so I kind of get my information more in the awakened state than getting too deep into theta and staying there for periods of time. but I've had many experiences where someone doesn't see me. They have no idea I'm there. They'll carry on conversations as if I'm invisible. I've had people do
Right.
that in my vehicle, and I've had to quickly say, okay, I recognize what's going on. I need to be safe. Let me surround my car with being seen. Let me surround my body with
Yeah.
being
Right.
seen. But I also am an observer. I love to observe. So I think maybe in my sleep state, I probably pop in and out of a lot of things. Did you feel like, could you feel yourself sort of jump back in your body, or was it real super subtle for you? And then your physical sensories were kicking in, which allowed you the awareness of, oh, I'm still sitting where I was before I went down the hole.
Well, no, as soon as I saw the couple and they were getting ready to have
Mm-hmm.
an amorous relationship, I snapped
Mm-hmm.
deeply into my physical body, full sensory awareness at the physical level. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I was able to, evidently I was still invisible, but when I had that thought, something has to happen. They have to leave. And the woman, again, was the first one to pick up something and then they left.
Mm-hmm. They were probably being energetically nudged. Hey,
Right.
there's somebody here, but we don't necessarily see him.
Right, right. And so my wife and I went around the world 4 times singing the Song of the New Earth, going to countries all over the world to plant the seed of sound. And
So
it sounds
that's my question.
really.
So
Mhm.
when you come back in your body and they asked you if you would sing this song, you created this song, correct? Through channeling with the Hathors? Or how
Yeah,
did this
it's
come
actually not
about?
one song. It's not one song. It's interesting. Every area of the earth has a different energetic profile, a different expression, if you will, of the earth energies. And so I would go to an area and I would connect to the Hathors, but the sounds were coming from the collective energies of that earth position. And so there were some similarities, but each song was different in different areas. If you put all the songs together, there would be an interesting melding of different frequencies.
Hmm. Went around the world 4 times, singing a variety of different songs within the song because they
Mhm.
all have different tones.
Right. It's more tone, it's even more beyond tones. It's like a complex melodies and harmonies. Uh, it gets very complex.
Well, what did Judy, correct, is your wife?
Yes.
What did
Mhm.
she think about all of this? Was she just like, hey, obviously I signed up for this, let's go?
Well, she is an amazing person, and she and I connected after I was comfortable with the Hathors. Um, and so when she experienced that, um, the energy of the Hathors in a workshop, we got to be very close friends before, but we didn't talk about work. We just hung out. Um,
Mhm.
and then at a workshop, first workshop, she became enthralled with the Hathor energy and the information they were bringing, and she was totally um, at alignment with what they were doing and what they were talking about. And so she was absolutely indispensable to us going around the world and doing the sound work and also
Mhm.
editing and reformatting the Hathor book, Messages from an Ascended Civilization.
So powerful. Well, we always know that spirit divinely or source, whatever you like to call, always divinely puts us together with people who are going to complement the mission that we're on instead of necessarily derailing it, which we get a lot of in our own world. So tell me a little bit about your singing methods. Like, were you a singer before? Like, were you a
Mhm.
musician and all of that was something of interest to you? Did you find that it just
Yeah,
completely
yeah,
changed your
definitely.
trajectory on music?
That's a funny story. So yes, I was a musician before I ever encountered the Hathors. My mother was a consummate vocalist. She was a contralto, could reach extremely high notes up in the soprano
Mm,
range, down into the bass notes. I mean, she was had powerful mastery of sound. So when she would sing at churches, people would weep. She was that powerful a singer. So I'm sure that that was the genetic transmission from her to me. That was the gift. One of the many gifts that she gave me was her that orientation to the voice. And so I went into music. It was the 60s when I started to explore music. So I was into folk music and country music and was playing guitar and piano. And I would go into bars and sing and make money. That's why I put myself through school part way. And I decided when I graduated that I was going to go to Nashville and become a songwriter. And I went to Nashville, very little money, this, the starving artist. And all the studio engineers kept telling me, you are so good, you're going to be explored at any moment, and your career will kick in. But it never happened. And I remember this is a strange story. So let's put it in the imaginary box because it is so out there. But this is what actually happened. I had my car I called Big Red. It was an old Galaxy Ford with rust and red. It's color red merged with the rust. And I drove it all over the country. And it was sitting during a full moon, parked in front of the house, and a van pulled up at a stop sign and burst into flames. It's just the engine caught on fire for whatever reason. So my friend Woody and I go out and look, and we see this van on fire. My car's sitting there. The car's like 100 yards from it, and there shouldn't be any connection, but I felt something had happened to my car. So I went in and slept, and the next day I got up to go to work, and the car wouldn't start. And I called a repair person. He says, your timing belt, it's going to cost you $2,000. Well, we're back in the early 1970s, and he could have told me it's $1 million. I couldn't afford, so I had to junk the car and leave Nashville. And I decided to go back to North Carolina, to Chapel Hill area, Greensboro, because that's, where I had some friends. And to make a very long story short, I saw a poster that said psychic readings. A meeting is being held with a psychic, and it's free. That was the big word for me, free, because I had no money. So I go into this meeting with a woman called Marion Starnes, who was an extraordinary psychic. I mean, unbelievable. And she said that if you had car problems on the day where my car was damaged by this strange energetic during the full moon, it's because the White Brotherhood was asking for energy to be offered up to protect the earth. And my mind just went crazy. I said, who are the White Brotherhood, and what right do they have to fuck with my car, my only mean of transportation? I mean, I was like, wow. And then she said, if you are wanting a session, if you have a session scheduled with me, please come up and talk to my assistant. And if you want to have a future session, come up and talk to my assistant. So my body gets up. This was my experience. I didn't do this. My body stood up and started walking toward, and I was at the back of the line of all these people coming up to the assistant. And I thought, boy, this is really weird. And I get there and I say, I would like to session with Marion Starnes. And she said, well, it will be at least 6 to 9 months before you get in to see her because she is so booked up. At this point, Marion Starnes stops talking to the woman she's talking to. Says, just a moment. She turns to the assistant. I will see him on my lunch hour tomorrow. And the assistant was like, whoa. So I see Marion Starnes. I go in for a reading. I'd never had a psychic reading before. I really didn't know what they did. But she read my life like a freaking book with detail after detail that nobody could have known. And she said, had you stayed in Nashville for another month, you would have been discovered and you would have had a career in country music. But your soul wanted something different. Your soul extracted you from that. And you will be working with sound and you will be doing healing work. She said, I don't know what it's going to look like, but that's why that's why Nashville didn't happen. And then she
Wow.
said something that was very interesting. I didn't even tell her about this. She said, do you remember when you were about 12 years old and you were in an apartment building with your family and you would sing in the rec room? And my jaw must have dropped because I did that a lot as a child because there was nobody in the building, and the rec had this wonderful rec room had a wonderful echo. So I would go in and sing and travel on the echo. I didn't even realize I was doing sound therapy, sound healing, but I didn't realize that at the time. I was just making sound and I felt better. One day I was making all these weird sounds and some man comes up who I'd never seen before, never saw after that incident. He just stopped and he said, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want you to know that you're going to heal many people in this world with your voice. And then he left. And Marion Starnes said, well, that was not really a man, that was an angel. sent to give you a very important message. So that, again, all that goes in the imaginary box, but that was my experience. She was an
Wow.
incredibly powerful psychic and healer.
Did you continue to see her as you
Every now and again,
progressed?
yes, every now and then. And we, at one point, she said she invited me over to sleep in her bedroom while she slept somewhere else in the house. And she said, the reason I'm doing this is because the spirits and the angels come through that room at night and give me information, impart things, and I'd like you to be able to receive that. So I went, and it was like a Steven Spielberg movie all night. Angel after angel, geometric patterns of energy, light. It was, so she was a very powerful, powerful psychic and healer.
Well, you can look back at all of that now and see how instrumentally it just pivoted you in a different direction. You were going to be successful regardless. You just didn't know it was going to unfold in the way that it did,
Mm-hmm.
and the power of music. And you were also into country when country really wasn't cool in the 60s.
Right.
Yeah, I remember. I was alive then. Yeah, early teen. Okay, so from then forward, you began to make your music. And in the beginning, when you started making your music, how did that look and sound and feel to others? How was it received to others?
You mean the music that I would compose, or the music that Hathors brought forward?
Both, both.
Well, what the comment I got from the positive comments I got from people were that when I performed one of my compositions, they traveled to another realm of their mind and they really enjoyed it. When I
Mhm.
started bringing forward the Hathor music, it changed from enjoyment to transformation. People were being transformed by listening to these sounds. So it was it was using the language of music, but it was a very different expression and was addressing different areas of the psyche.
I know for me, when I first, it was an acupuncturist healer, and she recommended that I get on your website and sign up for your newsletter so that when you came out with new MP3s, I could listen. And I just remember for me, it was like, and my first language is feeling, is feeling, and then translating that into other things. So I've had to navigate the world a little differently than others. Um, it was such a feeling that I think it was so celestial, but yet it was also ET-ish. And it just sounded to me like it was coming from a universal chorus. Um, this symphony beyond symphony. And it made me, it not, I wouldn't say made me, but it connected with something in my cells that it sounded familiar to me, but yet I knew I'd never heard it before. And so it was actually addicting. I had to go through and I wanted to listen to more things. And, I just couldn't wait for your new newsletter to come out. Let me know what you came up with. But it's beyond powerful. And I was also looking at there, and you have one for I guess stimulating and activating the pancreas and the pituitary. And I think when I dove in a little bit further, I had no idea that you had those in there too.
Yeah, the body is the line I like is from Lama Lina, who's a Tibetan Buddhist, American Tibetan Buddhist teacher, an authentic Lama connected to the lineage. And so she was talking about how consciousness, how we frame and create changes in our mind, and how that creates changes in the outer reality. And music is a vehicle that allows us to enter those more fluid states of consciousness.
Yeah, it
And so
makes
people
sense.
I've heard from a lot of people that they have a similar experience when they hear the Hathor sounds, they feel like they've come home. People use the phrase, I felt like I came home. I knew it. I knew what the next note was going to be, but I never heard it before. I never heard
Hmm.
the music before, but when I hear it, I recognize it. So that's a common experience.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
we
I
live a
I couldn't read a music sheet if you paid me. I have no clue. And for somebody who came in here with so much to say, I apparently came in with a vocal cord paralysis. So I don't sing or talk or tone like other people do. And so, but I recognize things when I hear it, but more so when I feel it. And it felt like something I literally had no explanation, but it expanded me beyond what I thought I could even be expanded before I ever thought I knew anything about anything, if you know what I mean.
Yes, right. I've been friends with Dr. Valerie Hunt, who was an extraordinary researcher from UCLA, and she did scientific documentation of the chakra system. But she didn't get into that work until later. At first, she had been asked to study Rolfing. She had her physiological devices looking at a patient while they were going through the process, and she could pick up the vortices of energy. Recording stopped. Okay.
We're just going to go with it.
Yeah. So she said that she noticed these energy fields that were different than the fascia, which is what gets stimulated in Rolfing. And she traced it out. It was located along the spine, and it was the 7 major chakras. And she started studying that, became a very complex physiological insight. And one day she was talking about sound and music. We were talking about the Hathors and everything. And she said, you know, the human voice is the purest tone generator there is. And if it's done properly, the human voice can affect the quantum field being the nesting and the birther of any phenomena that occurs in our world. So using that, her insight, when we use our voices in a certain way, we can actually affect the quantum realm, and that would affect us deeply in profound ways that would bypass thought and go directly to feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I know from being a massage therapist in the 90s, I learned that, you know, when you vibrate a particular, say, a trigger point or an area in the body, or if you're just moving your hand in an area, that vibration then can override the production of pain.
Yes,
And so you have to also realize too that every organ, and of course you know this, I'm just talking out loud, every organ has its own musical rhythm. Every there's a dance going on underneath this hood that many people wouldn't realize, and everything is this beautiful universal symphony. And I think that's why when you can listen to certain music, it just evokes and invokes so many things, emotions, um, you know, tears, you know, that create tears or can stimulate anger, or there's always a physiological response.
yes. And music can do the same thing. Anything that creates a vibration
Yes.
can have a similar effect if it's applied properly.
Yes. Yeah. It just reconfirms to me, you know, we are moving, living, breathing beings that require constant action. They're always in some kind of fluid movement.
Right,
And most of us aren't listening to music that is going to enhance the harmonics of the internal system, the internal software. We're
right.
listening to things that simulate the external and keeping us more into what I want to call that mental monkey mind. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. And I think our culture is oriented toward externals and not internals, internal values, internal experiences. So I think that when a person enters the path, whatever you want to call it, the exploration of their inner world, no matter
Mm-hmm.
whether it's through mystical Christianity, shamanism, science, whatever, it's almost like a revolutionary act because you're going against the cultural grain and you're exploring internal space. When your culture says, no, no, the only thing that matters is how much you have, how much you make, what you buy, whoever has the most toys at the end wins.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting thing to watch as our culture seems to be fragmenting, falling apart in some ways, reforming in other ways, that a increasing number of people are turning inward to try to find something inside that's of value as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's value comes from the external relationships to other people and the earth and other sentient beings, and also comes from inside a relationship to selves, I would say, because actually we're a multiplicity of selves. There are many of us inside this body in terms of psychological movements and energies.
So would you think that that would also translate to all the different fragments of self and higher self and and guide teams and different fragments of who we were in other lifetimes. Would that go into that?
All part, it's all a gestalt. Very complex, yes.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that Spirit's been showing me a lot of this year is to, in order to understand the exterior, you've got to understand the interior. And so to
Yes.
find your frequency dial and to lock it in, and that nobody has permission to move your frequency dial unless you allow it. You can't blame anyone else. So to actually look and visualize like a soundboard where you're adjusting everything so that you're in harmony and you're going out into your daily life more intact, more in tune, and nobody else can play around with your soundboard. And I'm
Mhm.
not a musician or anything, so I can't even describe that. I had to look up what it was they were showing me, and they were just saying it's like a soundboard. Is that what you would call it? Where you adjust the treble and the bass, you know, when we used to play and
Yeah,
listen.
I could see that metaphor. Yeah.
Okay, okay. They show me in metaphors about everything. They'll show me pictures and then I have to find the words to, and sometimes I'm just at a loss of words. But normally if I'm talking to somebody, they'll get what it is that I'm saying. So, and that just could be the vibration of my vocals, even though one doesn't move and only one does,
Mhm.
which is interesting. So, you know, I was thinking about, you know, we have so much that has gone on in the last 5 years that's leaving many people miffed and befuddled or hardened or disassociated or um, appreciative of what's going on. So, and some people are awake to some of the things that are going on in the world, and we could sit here and chat about those, but it would be irrelevant. I think anyway, it'd be a waste of our time. But what would you say for somebody who maybe isn't so awakened? Which ones of your music pieces would be the most beneficial to help open them up? And then for those who are awakened, which ones would help them go a little further into their journey? You have
So
any
you're
that
asking a
come to
question.
mind?
So you're asking about which of my compositions would serve those who are brand new at this and which might serve those who are more advanced? Is that the question?
Well, I guess for some that just aren't really awakened to the rhythm of all, just evoking information about just awakening to themselves. And then for those who are awakened, which ones might take them in a little bit deeper into the exploration of self?
Well, I think the CD Forbidden Songs, which were my compositions, so they're not Hathor, they're coming from me,
Mm-hmm.
but they have the signature of emotional transformation and healing
Mm-hmm.
because they're talking about issues with the heart, the human heart. And all of us have experiences with being attracted to someone or something and then repulsed, and then all that gestalt that goes on and the confusions. And in that confusion, there is an opening in the heart that can occur, and we can accept what's happening in our life. And all these songs are about that. So even without any understanding of a higher worlds or anything like that, listening to sound, I've had people do this. In fact, I got an email from Russia, from the Science Academy, who had brought me to Moscow to teach. And shortly after that, I released Forbidden Song. And the organizer said, "How dare you write music that is so emotional and stabs my heart with awareness?" She was being facetious, but she was pointing out how powerful it was for her. So
Mm-hmm.
if somebody has no background in this, I would suggest listening to Forbidden Songs, and because it will open up some awareness in their emotional being. For those who are waking up, more advanced, Lord, I would say just look at everything in the website, especially anything that has to do with the Hathors. That will open something. It will trigger.
Is the heart portal sound meditation, is that Hathor or is that you?
Yes, that's Hathor.
Hathor. Thank you. Yeah, because you've got tons on there. So, a few times I've had to just kind of go down the list and then go, which one is calling to me in this moment? And then would you recommend that, you know, people listen to the Forbidden Song? Do you think they should listen to it more than once just to
Yeah, yeah,
stimulate?
yeah.
All right, what about the one about the pituitary gland and the crystalline?
Mhm.
Because a lot of people are all into, I got to get up here and, 5D, and I got to get up out there. And spirit keeps telling me, you got to get in here first, and you better
Yes, you
ground
do.
home
I agree.
first. Um,
Yes, I
and
agree.
then once you master the grounding of the home and you've got your frequency locked in, then you can expand your consciousness, and blend. They keep showing me blending the subconscious into the conscious mind so that now the subconscious mind is a little bit bigger than the conscious mind. So it's kind of what I work with people on past life regression and hypnosis, is to become more aware and expand the conscious mind. So would you recommend the pituitary one as well?
Um, sure. And the Hathors were, there's one for the pituitary and one for the pineal, and several other endocrine
Yes.
systems of the body that they focused on. And so in science, we call it the third ventricle. It's an opening in the brain where cerebral spinal fluid comes up and circulates through these ventricles. And the third ventricle is in the center of the brain, more or less. And toward the back, it's like a cave. And in the back of that ventricle is the pineal gland. And in the front lower part is the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is the master regulator of the entire endocrine system. So in
Mhm.
the pituitary gland meditation that you were mentioning, the Hathors created sound fields that sent light into the what are called the hypothalamic pathways that go from the pituitary through into all the major organs. So it was a way of infusing light into the endocrine system. So that was the purpose of the pituitary meditation you mentioned. The
Mm.
pineal has to do with Bruce Lipton is a brilliant biological researcher, and he talks about the power of the pineal gland as a kind of antenna to other frequency realms. And that's how the Hathors view it. So that one is to kind of clean the dust off the pineal gland so we can receive impressions from higher realms of our own consciousness. So those are the two things that the Hathors were working on. And in the ancient traditions coming out of India, the third ventricle is called the cave of Brahma. And the Siddhas yogis say that it is in the third ventricle that we create our perception of reality. So it's very interesting, powerful vortex right in that third ventricle area.
So the question that's coming through me right now is, how people like more, more, more instant gratification. So they might go out and
Yes.
start pounding all of these, all in one day or repeatedly, because they just want that big bang. Would you say maybe take one at a time so that you're not overstimulating the endocrine system? Because we already
I
have,
do.
yeah.
You have to pace yourself. You have to pace
Hmm.
yourself.
Yeah.
There is
So
something in our
warning, warning,
society that
warning.
is very, yeah, there's something in our society that's very toxic. And it's a thought form that more is better, big
Yes.
is better. The more you get in less time, the better. And it has to do with greed and attachment to phenomena. So it's
Mhm.
really not a good mindset to enter this thing because you're dealing with potent energies. So yes, pace yourself. This was years and years ago, and somebody said they got headaches whenever they listened to my recordings, and I said, "Well, what are you listening to?" And he listed like 5 different things, and I said, "Well, what sequence are you doing?" No, I set up 5 different recorders and play them simultaneously through my headphones. And I said, "Well, no wonder you have a headache.
Oh my goodness.
Stop, basta, stop." Go back to one and give some space between the sessions. Hello.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. It was just coming through. It was like, warning, warning, don't take all this on at one time.
Oh,
Just
no,
one
no.
day at a time. Just maybe listen to the same one, but don't go into all of them. There was another one I wanted to ask you about. I think it was the corpus callosum. Can you
Yes.
tell me a little bit about that music and what it does?
Well, that particular recording was a recording at a live workshop, a Hathor workshop. And I just finished work with the Hathors, and this was a way to integrate. And it was based on the work of Dr. Milton Erickson. So there's a story that I'm telling, and I'm playing a drum at the same time. And the drum creates a pattern that increases alpha and theta activity in the brain. This has
Mhm.
been scientifically documented that you can change brain state with the drum. And occasionally I would make some sound. And I told a story, and the story takes you into a canyon, which is the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is a thick band of neural fibers that connect the right and left hemispheres of the brain. It sits right in the center of the brain. And if you look at the brain, there's a chasm right at the top. And that's underneath that is the corpus callosum. And so this particular meditation, and people have told me that they get tremendous insights when they go through this meditation. Because the story is that you're out in a canyon and you're finding gems and diamonds that are new insights. And you're in the dream world, kind of waking dream world, you're going through this canyon, you're picking up things that are of value and putting it in a basket. And as people go through transformational experiences, when they return to that meditation, they get new insights. It's interesting. I love the work of Dr. Milton Erickson.
Yeah, so that's another one that take it slow.
Yeah, well, not as slow as some of the others, like the pituitary pineal, because I would say, don't listen to it more than once a day and pace it. The purpose of that particular meditation is to gain insight and empowerment from your own nature. Dr. Milton Erickson said that the resolution to a person's problem lies inside the person. So really all you need to do is to guide them to a space where they can self-recognize. And then that empowerment comes to them out of their own nature. And so that's what the story facilitates. So it's really not dangerous. It just might be, you might get deeper insight than you want.
Yeah, so be
Create
careful what you wish for.
yes,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. I know for me personally, I'm not one to go into the deep meditation part. Back in the late 80s and 90s, when a few people would get together to meditate, and then they would say they would go to all these places, and I would be like, I stayed right here in my body, and I was really trying to work with the pain in my hip or my back or my position. And so it really taught me how to be grounded with no music and nothing sidetracking me, so that as I've gotten older through the decades, I can get a lot of messages just in my day to day, even if it's chaotic. I will listen to certain music, and I think, what is it, the sophageal ones, and only if my nervous system, if I'm really high up in beta and I need 15 minutes to just bring that nervous system down, I may listen to things like that. When I listen to things that you've created and created with the Hathors, is I listen to that in a whole different mind, body, spirit combination, because my intention is to just immerse myself in that vibration, um, and merge my cells with it, if that makes sense.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
my expectation really is just for merging. It isn't, and then just to let things unfold.
Yeah, right. I think that's the right attitude for
Yeah.
this type of
So,
music.
so lots of times I won't have a giant light bulb moment, but I may get it a couple days later, and I can really pretty much take it back to things that I've done that invoke that within myself. Because sometimes I feel like we have a delayed response. Something will occur, and then 3 or 4 days later, we start to think about it, good, bad, or indifferent. Well, I know we're probably going to have to do a round two at some point with your busy schedule, but is there anything else that you would like to share with everyone, and anything that's coming to mind that might be important or pertinent on the 22nd of March, 2024?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of free content on the website. Sound meditations, lectures, talks, interviews, articles. A person, if they want to explore the science behind this, there's a tab called Acoustic Brain Research, and it's the research studies I did in the 1980s, late 80s, 90s. All that's there. It's all free. I would like to bring attention to something called the two things. One is the suicide prevention. As you know, suicide is really an issue all over the world. I mean, it's like an epidemic. People are just cannot cope. It's especially happening with young people. So we created years ago, back in the late 80s, a program to to help assist the prevention of suicide. And it's highly effective. It has a 30-year track record, clinically proven that it decreases suicide risk, increases self-esteem, um, decreases self-sabotage. And so we used to sell it, and we still sell it, but it's available for free for those who don't have the finances. This is $9.95. It's an MP3 download. But if the person can't afford it, they can get it for free. So I would say, if you know anybody who is struggling with suicide, this is free. Just tell them to go to the website and look up suicide prevention. And then the other thing is, on the website is called the Celestial Sangha. And the Celestial Sangha uses sound, and it's very interesting. You go into a meditative state and you float above the planet in your inner world, and you send various emotions to the planet while this music is going on. So it's a way to contribute positive energy to the atmosphere, the emotional atmosphere of the planet, because things are very disturbed right now. Very, very disturbing. So as an embodied being on the planet, you have the right to do things to help. And that's where that's coming from. And that if a person feels aligned with planetary service, that might be a very good thing for them to look at. And that's free as well.
Well, I am so glad you brought that up, because when you were saying that, ding ding, some bells were going off, and pretty much the entire month of February, I was getting bombarded with mothers with teenagers, or um, relatives that were in their teens or even in their early 20s, some autistic, some not, that were hearing a lot of voices. They were getting a lot of, they're very evolved children, but they're getting so bombarded with so much energy that they can't separate the two, and they can't shut it up. And some of which have said to me, they just want to just, what would happen if I just jumped off the balcony and made this stop? And I've had to kind of talk them through that, and then talk the parent through assisting. But this suicide prevention thing, I am so glad you brought that up, because we've got so many people right now getting bombarded by the energies, along with the clash of the daily day and requirements,
Yeah.
and all of that brings. Even the best of the best have been struggling. So
Yeah,
if let's just say if I'm on overload and I'm feeling like, I'm going to burst, and I'm not a suicidal person or would ever think of leaving the planet, um, by any means, I want to stay here and do my work. Would just listening to that be helpful?
yes, it would be. And it
Okay.
would be more masterful to uh, engage what we call the locus of self-control, which is a capacity we have as humans to change our internal orientation. So if we are bombarded by too much information and we can't process it, there are techniques that were developed in ancient China and in India and Tibet. In Taoism, out of China, it's called stillness practice. And it's a way to, and it's in the website, and person can actually go there, and I tell the steps of how to do this. And I've taught this to thousands of people. And people who can't meditate because their minds are so active tell me they can meditate with this. It brings their mind to a still point. And when we come to a still point, or in Buddhism, it's called calm abiding or equanimity, when we're in that state, things change in our emotions and the way energies are flowing. So finding a way to enter an internal space of peace or calm is a good strategy, especially in these times, because my feeling is things are going to get even more intense. And the Hathors have actually said, you have seen nothing yet on this planet.
Yeah, I've been really working on trying to make sure that my fulcrum is strong, so that I can balance and counterbalance whatever goes on. So I work on empowering myself and others. And I think that this music and everything else is going to be extremely powerful and be a catalyst to help people go inward and figure out their own music boards and set their dials. But I have heard that things might get a little more turbulent. But you know what? If we're here to stay, we have to start working on ourselves to fine tune our own machine so that we can navigate.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's my thought on it. All right. Well, I am just blown away at how our time has flown here. And I know you're super duper duper busy, and I would love to have you back to do part two. We can do a little more Q&A. Today, I just really wanted everyone to kind of just get to know you who may not know you at all. So it's sort of an introduction. So I doing my best to stay out of it, although I have been talking. Um, okay. Well, anything else you want to say?
No, enjoy the ride.
Yeah,
That's my
enjoy the
advice.
ride.
Enjoy the ride because
All
we're on it.
right. Yes, we are. And you've got a choice. Stay on it or go ahead and fly off. It's up to you, but you may have to come back and repeat it. But why do that, right?
I'd have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I do that. Okay, everybody, please like, subscribe, and share. Leave us your comments. And we'll see you all in the next video. So Tom, stay put, but say goodbye to everybody.
All right. Goodbye.